I'm in love with you, but I do still have feelings for her too.
Oh,
He said it, and the room went silent. The kind of silence that makes your skin prickle because you know something irreversible just happened. Rick, sitting across from Trisha with the cameras rolling and the world watching, looked her straight in the eyes and admitted he still loves his ex. Not a vague "I care about her," not a harmless "we have history," but a raw, unfiltered confession that landed like a punch to the gut. Trisha's face didn't crumble, not at first. She just stared, wide-eyed, as if her brain was scrambling to process the words, her lips parted but no sound coming out. The tension was so thick you could almost see it, the kind that makes even the camera crew hold their breath, afraid to move, afraid to break the spell of shock that had settled over everything. For a moment, nobody moved. Rick's words hung in the air, heavy and sharp, and Trisha's hands, which had been nervously twisting in her lap, went completely still. You could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was replaying every conversation, every late-night promise, every time she'd chosen to trust him over her own doubts. The betrayal wasn't just in what he said, but in the timing, the way he waited until now, after all the plans and all the talk about forever, to finally drop the truth. It was as if he'd been holding on to this secret like a get-out-of-jail-free card. And now, with nowhere left to hide, he played it, leaving Trisha to pick up the pieces. But how did it come to this? Just a few days ago, Rick was all smiles and sweet words, telling Trisha she was the best thing that ever happened to him. He met her family, laughed at her dad's jokes, even helped her mom in the kitchen, acting like he was already part of the family. They talked about the future, about moving in together, about starting a family of their own. Rick promised her the world, and Trisha, who wanted so badly to believe in love again, let herself fall. She ignored the warning signs, the late-night texts he brushed off as work stuff, the way he always seemed distracted when she mentioned his ex, the little lies that didn't add up but were easy to overlook when you're in love and desperate for it to work. Now, with one sentence, Rick has shattered every bit of trust she built. The betrayal isn't just about another woman. It's about every moment Trisha spent defending him to her friends, every time she told herself she was being paranoid, every time she chose hope over her own instincts. The silence between them is deafening, filled with all the things Trisha wants to say but can't. Not yet. Because she's still trying to understand how the man she thought she knew could hurt her like this. Rick doesn't look sorry. If anything, he looks relieved, like he's finally said the thing he's been dying to say, the thing that's been eating at him for months. There's a strange calmness in his voice, a sense that he's already moved on, even as Trisha sits there, her world collapsing around her. And now the questions start swirling, not just for Trisha, but for everyone watching. Did Rick ever really love her, or was she always the backup plan, the safe choice while he waited for his ex to come back? What's really going on with this ex? The woman who seems to haunt every corner of their relationship, popping up in texts and memories and late-night phone calls? Why now, after all this time? Does Rick choose this moment to confess? Is he hoping Trisha will walk away so he doesn't have to be the bad guy? Or is he testing her, seeing how much she'll tolerate before she finally breaks? You're watching Reality Sport, and I'm Oliva. If you're as stunned as I am, hit that subscribe button right now and tell me in the comments what you think is really going on here. Do you believe Rick ever loved Trisha? Or was he always chasing a ghost from his past? I want to hear your wildest theories, because this story is only getting started, and trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. Trisha's face says it all. She's not crying, not yet, but you can see the storm building behind her eyes, the way her jaw tightens and her hands clench in her lap. The question is, will she walk away? Or is Rick about to talk his way out of this one too? The next move is hers, and nobody knows what she'll do. It didn't start with heartbreak. It started with butterflies, late-night calls that stretched until sunrise, and the kind of laughter that makes you forget the world outside. Rick and Trisha met at a friend's birthday party, and from the first moment, it felt like the universe had finally thrown Trisha a bone. Rick was charming, attentive, and just the right amount of mysterious. He listened when she talked about her dreams, remembered her favorite coffee order, and sent her good morning texts before she even opened her eyes. For a while, it was easy to believe she'd found the real thing, the kind of love that makes all the old wounds fade into the background. But even in those early days, there were cracks in the picture. Rick was always on his phone, quick to turn the screen away when Trisha glanced over, always with a reason why he couldn't show her who he was texting. He'd disappear for hours, sometimes days, with vague explanations about work or family emergencies. When Trisha asked questions, he'd laugh it off, call her paranoid, and promise he had nothing to hide. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that the man who made her feel so special couldn't possibly be hiding anything. But the doubts crept in, slow and steady, like water seeping through a crack in the wall. Her friends saw it before she did. They warned her, gently at first, then with more urgency as the months went by. They pointed out the way Rick always seemed to have an excuse, the way he never wanted to talk about his past, the way he flinched when someone mentioned his ex. Trisha brushed them off, convinced they just didn't understand. She told herself every couple has secrets, that trust takes time, that love means giving someone the benefit of the doubt. But late at night, when Rick was out and her phone was silent, the questions kept her awake. Was she being naive? Or was Rick really as loyal as he claimed? The truth was, Rick's ex was never far from the surface. Her name came up in stories and old photos that Rick refused to delete, in the way he'd get quiet when certain songs played on the radio. Trisha tried to ignore it, tried to convince herself that everyone has a past, that it didn't mean anything. But the signs were there, impossible to miss if you were willing to look. Rick would get defensive whenever Trisha asked about his ex, insisting they were just friends now, that she was like family. But then there were the late-night texts, the phone calls he took outside, the way he'd smile at his phone and then quickly put it away when Trisha walked into the room. It was a constant tug of war between hope and reality. Trisha wanted so badly to believe in the version of Rick who made her laugh, who held her hand in public, who whispered promises in the dark. But the other version, the one who kept secrets and dodged questions, was always lurking just beneath the surface. Her friends begged her to walk away, to see Rick for who he really was, but Trisha clung to the hope that love could fix what was broken. She told herself that if she just tried a little harder, if she just loved him enough, he'd finally let her in. But the truth was, Rick never let go of his ex. She was always there, a shadow in the background, a reminder of a life Rick wasn't ready to leave behind. Trisha tried to compete, tried to be everything Rick needed, but it was never enough. The more she gave, the more he pulled away, always with a new excuse, a new reason why he couldn't be fully present. It was a slow, painful realization, the kind that creeps up on you until one day you can't ignore it anymore. Did Trisha ignore the signs, or did Rick manipulate her trust so skillfully that she never stood a chance? Was she blinded by hope, or was Rick just that good at hiding the truth? The answer was waiting for her, hidden in plain sight, in the messages she was never supposed to see. One night, while Rick was in the shower, Trisha's phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced over, expecting a message from a friend, but instead saw Rick's phone light up with a name she recognized all too well. Curiosity got the better of her, and with trembling hands, she opened the messages. What she found changed everything. Trisha waited until Rick stepped out of the shower, her heart pounding so hard she could barely hear anything else. She sat on the edge of the bed, Rick's phone in her hand, the screen still glowing with the messages that made her stomach twist. When he walked in, towel around his waist, humming like nothing in the world was wrong, she didn't waste a second. She held up the phone, her voice steady but cold, and asked him to explain. The room felt smaller, the air heavier, as Rick's eyes darted from her face to the phone and back again. For a split second, he looked like he might try to laugh it off, but Trisha's expression told him this wasn't a joke. Not this time. She asked him, point blank, why he was still talking to his ex, why he was telling her things he'd never said to Trisha, why he was keeping secrets when he'd promised her honesty. Rick started with the usual lines, the ones he'd used 100 times before. He said he was just being honest, that he didn't mean to hurt her, that the messages didn't mean anything. He tried to spin it, saying he was only responding out of politeness, that he didn't want to be rude, that he was trying to keep the peace. But Trisha wasn't buying it. Not this time. She pressed him, her voice shaking with anger and hurt, demanding to know why he couldn't let go of the past, why he was still holding on to someone who clearly wasn't part of their future. Rick's excuses started to unravel. He said he cared about his ex, that she'd been there for him during hard times, that he couldn't just cut her out of his life. He insisted he loved Trisha, that she was the one he wanted to be with. but every word sounded hollow, every promise felt like a lie. Trisha's heartbreak was written all over her face. She wanted to scream, to cry, to throw something, but all she could do was sit there, stunned, as the man she loved tried to justify betraying her trust. The disbelief was almost worse than the anger. How could he look her in the eye and say he loved her, while still keeping another woman in his life? How could he expect her to accept being second choice, to share him with someone who should have been left in the past? She begged him, one last time, to set boundaries, to prove that she mattered more than his history. She asked him to block his ex, to show her that he was willing to fight for their relationship, to put her first for once. Rick hesitated, his face twisting with guilt and confusion. He said it wasn't that simple, that he didn't want to hurt anyone, that he needed time to figure things out. But Trisha had heard enough. She realized in that moment that Rick was never going to choose her. Not really. He was always going to keep one foot in the past, always going to leave the door open for his ex, always going to make excuses instead of commitments. The tension in the room was electric, every second stretching out as Trisha waited for Rick to make a choice. Would he finally step up, or would he let her walk away? The answer hung in the air, unspoken but obvious. Trisha stood up, her voice steady but full of pain, and gave Rick an ultimatum. Block your ex, or lose me forever. The choice was his, but for the first time, Trisha was ready to walk away if he didn't choose her. Trisha's words hung in the air, sharp and final, and for a moment Rick just stared at her, as if he couldn't quite believe she'd drawn a line he couldn't talk his way around. She told him, clear as day, block your ex, or we're done. And there was no room left for misunderstanding. Rick's face shifted, the easy charm slipping away, replaced by something raw and uncomfortable. He started to stammer, searching for the right words, but every excuse sounded weaker than the last. He said he was conflicted, that he cared about both women in different ways, that he needed time to process his feelings. He tried to make Trisha feel guilty for asking him to choose, painting himself as the victim, as if he was the one being forced into an impossible situation. He talked about loyalty, about how his ex had been there for him when no one else was, about how cutting her off would feel like betraying a piece of his own past. He said he didn't want to hurt anyone, that he wished things could be different, that he was trying his best, but Trisha could see through it now. She saw the way he twisted the story to make himself look noble, the way he tried to turn her demand for respect into an attack on his character. She felt the old pull, the urge to comfort him, to make excuses for him, to believe that if she just waited a little longer, he'd finally choose her. But something inside her had shifted. The pain was still there, but it was joined by a new sense of clarity, a realization that love without respect isn't love at all. Trisha's mind raced with memories, all the times she'd put Rick first, all the times she'd forgiven him, all the times she'd swallowed her pride to keep the peace. She thought about the promises he'd made, the future they'd planned, the way he'd looked at her when he said she was the only one. Now, faced with a simple choice, he hesitated. He wasn't fighting for her. Not really. He was fighting to keep his options open, to avoid the discomfort of making a real commitment. Trisha saw it now, clear as day. Rick wasn't confused. He was comfortable. He liked having two women care about him, liked the attention, liked the safety net. He wasn't willing to give up his past, even if it meant losing his future with her. The silence stretched between them, heavy and loaded, as Rick tried one last time to sway her. He said he loved her, that he didn't want to lose her, but he still wouldn't do the one thing she asked. Trisha felt the weight of her own heart, the ache of wanting something that was never truly hers. She realized she'd been fighting for a version of Rick that didn't exist, a man who would put her first, who would choose her without hesitation. The truth was, Rick had already made his choice. He just didn't want to admit it. With a deep breath, Trisha stood up straighter, her voice steady and strong. She told Rick she was done waiting, done begging, done being second best. If he couldn't block his ex, then he didn't deserve her. The power shifted in that moment, and for the first time, Rick looked scared. Trisha didn't need his answer anymore. She was done letting him decide her worth. She turned and walked away, leaving Rick alone with his excuses and his regrets, the control finally back in her hands. Trisha didn't look back as she walked out of that room, But Rick's voice followed her, desperate and pleading, echoing off the walls. He called her name, tried to grab her hand, begged her to listen, but she kept moving, her steps steady even as her heart pounded in her chest. She stopped only when she reached the door, turning to face him one last time. Her eyes were red but clear, her voice low but unshakable. She told him she was done, that she couldn't keep loving someone who refused to choose her, that she deserved more than half-truths and broken promises. Rick tried to interrupt, tried to explain, but Trisha held up her hand, silencing him. She said she hoped he found what he was looking for, but it wouldn't be with her. She pulled out her phone right there in front of him and blocked his number, his social media, every way he could reach her. It was a small act, but it felt monumental, like closing a door she'd been afraid to touch for too long. Rick's face crumpled, the confidence and control draining away as he realized she wasn't bluffing. He pleaded with her, said he could change, that he'd do anything to fix things, but Trisha shook her head. She told him she'd given him enough chances, that she was tired of waiting for him to grow up, tired of being the one who always forgave, always hoped, always settled for less than she deserved. For the first time, Rick was the one left behind, the one watching someone walk away and knowing there was nothing he could say to stop it. He tried to follow her, but Trisha didn't slow down. She felt the pain, sharp and raw, but underneath it was something new, a sense of relief, of freedom, of finally choosing herself. She thought about all the times she doubted her instincts, all the times she'd let Rick's words override her own feelings, all the times she'd convinced herself that love meant patience, forgiveness, sacrifice. Now she saw it for what it was, a pattern, a cycle she was finally breaking. Trisha's mind replayed the early days, the red flags she'd ignored, the warnings from friends she'd brushed aside. She remembered the way Rick always seemed to have an excuse, always found a way to make her feel like she was asking for too much. She saw now how he'd kept her on a string, never fully committing, always keeping one foot out the door. But she also saw her own growth, the way she'd learned to trust herself, to set boundaries, to demand respect. The pain was real, but so was the strength she'd found in walking away. Rick, left alone in the silence, finally faced the consequences of his choices. The power dynamic had flipped, and he was the one scrambling, the one begging for another chance. But Trisha was done playing that game. She walked out into the night, her head held high, her heart bruised, but not broken. She didn't know what came next, didn't know if Rick would try to win her back or if he'd finally let her go. But for the first time in a long time, she felt hope, not for the relationship, but for herself. Trisha's phone buzzed nonstop the next morning, her group chat lighting up with messages from friends who'd seen the breakup unfold on social media. Some sent heart emojis and words of support, others sent memes to make her laugh, and a few didn't hold back, saying they'd never liked Rick and were glad she finally saw through him. Her mom called, voice gentle but firm, telling Trisha she was proud of her for standing up for herself, reminding her that love should never feel like a competition. Her sister, always the blunt one, said it was about time Trisha stopped letting a man treat her like a backup plan. The validation felt good, but it was the tough love that stuck with her. The reminders that she deserved more, that she was stronger than she thought, that this pain was proof she'd finally chosen herself. Meanwhile, Rick was busy trying to rewrite the story. He posted a long, rambling message on his socials, painting himself as the misunderstood guy who tried his best but was punished for being honest. He gave a short interview to a gossip blog insisting he never cheated, that he was always upfront about his feelings, that Trisha was the one who couldn't handle the truth. The comments section exploded, half the audience rolling their eyes at his excuses, the other half calling him out for emotional cowardice. Rick's denial only made things worse, his attempts to save face coming off as desperate and tone-deaf. He wanted sympathy, but all he got was a flood of people telling him to grow up and let Trisha move on. Viewers everywhere felt for Trisha. They saw themselves in her. How easy it is to fall for someone who says all the right things but never follows through. How hard it is to walk away when your heart is still tangled up in hope. The frustration with Rick was palpable, not just because he hurt Trisha, but because he refused to take responsibility, always shifting the blame, always acting like the victim. People debated in the comments, was Rick ever honest, or was he always playing both sides? Did Trisha stay too long, or was she just holding on to the dream of what could have been? The answers weren't simple, but the lessons were clear. Boundaries matter. If someone can't respect them, they don't deserve a place in your life. Self-worth isn't about being chosen by someone else, it's about choosing yourself, even when it hurts. Red flags aren't decorations, they're warnings, and ignoring them only leads to more pain down the road. Trisha's story hit home for a lot of people, a reminder that love shouldn't feel like a test you're always failing, that you don't have to compete with someone's past to have a future. But just when it seemed like the dust had settled, Rick made one last move. He sent Trisha a long message, pouring out his heart, saying he missed her, that he'd finally blocked his ex, that he was ready to start over if she'd give him another chance. Trisha read the message in silence, her fingers hovering over the reply button. For a moment, the old ache returned, the temptation to believe he'd changed, that things could be different this time. But then she remembered the pain, the lies, the way she'd felt when she finally walked away. She typed a short reply, wishing him well, but making it clear she was done. She hit send, blocked his number again, and put her phone down, feeling lighter than she had in months. Trisha woke up to sunlight streaming through her window, the kind of morning that feels like a clean slate. For the first time in ages, she didn't reach for her phone to check for Rick's messages or scroll through old photos, searching for signs she'd missed. Instead, she made coffee, called her mom, and let herself breathe. The ache was still there, but it was softer now, edged with relief. She started saying yes to things she'd put off for too long, brunch with friends, a yoga class, even a solo movie night. Each small step felt like a victory, proof that she could build a life that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else to choose her. She found herself laughing more, sleeping better, and slowly letting go of the need to understand why Rick couldn't give her what she deserved. Healing wasn't a straight line, but every day she felt a little stronger, a little more herself. She started journaling again, writing down the things she wanted for her future, the boundaries she'd never let anyone cross again. Her friends noticed the change, cheering her on as she reclaimed her confidence, her spark, her sense of possibility. Even her family, who'd watched her struggle for so long, could see the difference. Trisha was moving forward, not because she'd forgotten the pain, but because she'd finally learned to put herself first. Meanwhile, Rick was left with the silence he'd always tried to avoid. The calls and texts he sent went unanswered, his social media posts got fewer likes, and the friends who used to take his side started to drift away. He spent more time alone, replaying old conversations, wondering if he'd made a mistake or if he was just doomed to repeat the same patterns. Maybe he'd learn from this, maybe he wouldn't. But for once, the story wasn't about him anymore. The power he'd held over Trisha was gone, replaced by a quiet emptiness he couldn't fill with excuses or new distractions. For everyone watching, there was a sense of closure, a feeling that justice had finally been served. Trisha's journey wasn't perfect, but it was real, and seeing her walk away from someone who couldn't love her fully felt like a win for anyone who's ever been stuck in a one-sided relationship. The satisfaction came not from revenge, but from watching someone find the courage to choose themselves, to break the cycle, to believe that something better is possible. It was a reminder that heartbreak isn't the end of the story, it's the start of a new chapter, one where you get to write the rules. But if you think the drama ends here, think again. There's another couple on the horizon, and their secrets make Rick and Trisha's story look tame. Next time, we're diving into a relationship where trust is shattered in a single night, and the fallout leaves everyone questioning what's real and what's just for show. If you thought this breakup was wild, wait until you see what happens when loyalty is put to the ultimate test. Don't miss it, because on reality sport, the truth is always messier than fiction, and the next twist is just around the corner.